So a boss of mine, I remember years ago, said to me something. He said, Josh, remember, it's a privilege to be able to develop land within our cities, and we should never take that for granted.
Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
I'm James Ashley, and today I will be connecting you with Josh Kaufman. Josh is the Vice President of Development and Construction for the Canadian Multifamily Division at Starlight Investments. Prior to joining Starlight, Josh held Vice President and Senior Vice President titles at Dream and was the Vice President at Smart Centers. In this episode, Josh talks to the trends that are driving real estate development in the GTA. We take a deep dive into multifamily residential and talk about financing, pricing, and strategizing new projects. We discuss the decisions that helped to shape Josh's career and the big lessons that he would choose to pay forward to the next generation of leaders. This conversation is packed full of great takeaways, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the next 45 minutes as I introduce you to Josh Kaufman. Josh, welcome. Thank you for joining us on the People Who Perform podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, James, for having me.
Now, you've certainly built a credible reputation in both the commercial and the residential development and construction. And I know you have a mountain of knowledge and experience to share with our listeners. So without further ado, let's get this conversation underway and begin by taking a closer look at development in the GTA. Now, you've been in the space for over 20 years and you've been around the industry for much longer. Can you talk to us about how the trends have evolved over the course of your career in real estate?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for aging me more than we needed to. 20 years plus. Okay, we'll just call it 20 years and leave it at that.
We'll round up.
Yeah, exactly. We'll round up or round down, whatever you like. Home building has evolved both in terms of the way that we build, but also what we are building. For the way that we build, we're using software like Procore that helps coordinate activities and task management. A lot more automation in terms of the way that we alert our trades and the way that we commence projects and the way that we alert trades in terms of when they're completed. Those are the reason why I mention that is it's a system that really didn't exist back in the early days when I was building homes. It was very manual. It was pick up the phone and call the electrician as soon as the mechanical and the HVAC was done. Okay, electricians finish your work. Okay, let's bring in the guys to insulate. Let's put the vapor barrier. Let's start with the drywall. So it was very manual. It was by phone, and it was usually slugging your way to go ahead and get to the trades of the site. Everything is much more efficient. So there really isn't a lot of downtime. Most recently, I had, before I started Starlight, I worked with a great company out of Guelph that what just really was amazing, the way that they built. I was watching single family homes get built within 16 weeks, from establishing the property to excavating all the way to turning the keys over to the homeowner. That couldn't be done without having modern technologies and systems like Procore, but it's also efficiency that's changed within the industry. So I think that's really a welcome change. As far as what we're building on the home side, there's been a great tension, I believe, between quantity and quality, cost being a significant factor. But I think you're seeing smaller homes with higher quality materials. Of course, the monster homes will always be built by those that can afford it. But for the masses that are less liquid or have the discretionary spend opportunity, quality and smaller is gaining more prominence. So I'm seeing that as a trend. Singles homes making room for towns, followed by stacked towns, and of course, the apartment community. Vertical communities and mixed-use communities are the dominant construction form these days within our urban centers. And we know that as land is becoming that much more expensive and it's a dwindling supply, you have to go up with your construction and your build to make projects work. We have all heard the adage that we're not making any more land. So to maximize the land value, we have to build up, especially within the urban environments, to make sense of projects. On the commercial side, where I spent a lot of my career, in big box retail especially, back in 2005, I started on that journey. It was all about the big box supercenters, large parcels of land, these huge boxes that were being filled with products from various national and regional and sometimes local retailers. Boxes, especially for the department stores, became larger to fill shelves and facilitate demand. Developments were large, between 20 and 40 acres across the country. So I had an opportunity to be a part of those developments and several shopping centers across Canada. About 10 years ago, we started to see a different form of retail take shape. And I also had the good fortune of being a part of that. And that was the American concept of the outlet mall. And it started to appear in Canada. A few were built in the major urban centers, from Vancouver to Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto, and Montreal. Huge opportunity and demand to have so many retailers offering discounted products or specialty tailored products to serve the outlet mall opportunity. It's interesting to see that, as I go on and we know that there's this scaling down, I say that there's the enclosed shopping centers and the outlet malls continue to gain tremendous prominence. These are the regional centers. They are getting the huge draw in terms of populations. I remember working on the Toronto Premium Outlets out in Houghton Hills. And I had the good fortune under Smart Centers and Callaway and Simon Properties to work on that project. And that was a real, feather in my cap and feather in the cap for the company. And it was amazing, when I asked, those that were so much more knowledgeable in the outlet mall space, what makes for a good outlet mall. And they say, well, having a location that when you can drive within 45 minutes and basically attach yourself to the largest population possible, be it 5 million people like we have with Toronto Premium Outlets, is usually a good recipe for success. And happy to say that mall is doing tremendously well. And again, no surprise that some of the larger urban malls that we see across the country continue to do very well. And especially if you can kind of cater to the masses. Over the past 5 to 7 years, I've seen a significant shift in retail, with smaller footprints being occupied by shopping malls. The 20-acre parcels are now 5 to 10 acres, as opposed to 300,000 square feet and 400,000 square foot department store anchor properties. It's now smaller grocery anchor properties of 50 to 100,000 square feet. Going one step further, ways get closer towards the urban cores and intensified areas where land is at a premium. The opportunity presents itself to build mixed-use retail and residential communities. At-grade retail and commercial with residential or office above, parking lots being replaced with buildings and now parking below grade. So great opportunities for retailers to get customer attention from a built-in captive population. Grocery stores, personal service, gyms, pet food stores, and other offerings that cater to the urban dweller that is interested in those that just come for the just-in-time purchases.
Thanks for providing the overview on the trends across the GTA, Josh. Now, we are going to take a deeper dive into the residential asset class and in particular, new purpose-built private rentals. Let's start with financing. How should we be approaching the numbers when looking to undertake a new project?
So we start by determining the highest and best use for the property. We all love to build high rises, the height of 1 Bloor Street in Toronto. However, many of us don't have that luxury. So you want to make sure that projects make sense, both in terms of form and as well as financially. It's important that projects don't stray too far from the planned function that's established by the municipality that we're in. So a boss of mine, I remember years ago, said to me something. He said, Josh, remember, it's a privilege to be able to develop land within our cities, and we should never take that for granted. So that was a great comment from a great leader. And I think often about this when we're designing our projects. We don't wake up in the morning saying that we want to challenge the city and go against the grain. There are friends, they bring much to the table from design, experience, and general assistance. So I've also learned in my career that projects can be significantly impacted by time. The longer it takes to develop and put a shovel in the ground, the worse off the return is going to be. So being able to deliver projects that have the cooperation of the city and planners is of the utmost importance. For residential and commercial projects, I learned from one of my friends and trusted advisors that it all starts with value creation, establishing the realistic project value once at full stabilization. determine a minimum return threshold for the project, what's important for you, what's important for your stakeholders and your partners. Then you layer in your costs. So that's your lands, your soft costs, your hard costs, your financing, and with the intent of protecting that minimum project return.
Now, when it comes to the project pro forma, what do you look for to ensure that those numbers are working for you, Josh?
I try to keep myself always grounded with the main KPIs that any partner, any institution, any investor would look at. So I look at the IRRs, internal rate of returns. I look at the yield on costs or the net operating income over the costs. I look at the profit margin. And I want to make sure that the minimum returns are achieved, but also I always want to layer in the appropriate contingency, accounting for the unforeseen events. It could be timing, it could be a delay that relates to approvals. And we all know, working in our municipalities, things always take longer than we always anticipated on our original project performance and business plans. I account for construction delays, case in point, what we're dealing with today under this unfortunate pandemic. Things are all taking longer to go ahead and build. There are less people on site. There's a lot more physical distancing. And as a result, the timelines that we typically would have established back when these performers first got approved and envisioned are just being added onto. So I'm seeing significant delays, unfortunately. So being able to build in contingency is very important. And then, of course, obviously, as we're all seeing these days, is cost escalation. So those are very important. So you establish your minimum return thresholds. You keep your eye on that prize. You make sure you're always achieving that with whatever you need. And many times what you've all got to do throughout a project is you've got to value engineer as you go through it. So if your goal is to go ahead and make sure that you've maintained those returns, make sure you've maintained the IRRs as well as the yields, okay? And obviously knowing that's what your goal is, you always want to make sure you've got that in hand as you work through a project. It's easy to get caught up and let an extra month or two pass and don't worry, it'll all get done, or throw in some additional cost for something else you want, but always go back to look at the return.
Thanks for sharing your strategy. Now, can you talk to us about the differences between the pro forma development between market rental versus affordable housing?
Quite honestly, James, I haven't had much experience with affordable housing, but I do know that the fundamentals are for the most part the same, whether you're looking at market or you're looking at affordable. And I say and really the biggest difference are the inputs, be it revenue and potentially costs on the provision of that affordable housing. Personally, I think the name affordable is also misleading, and I'm going to say it out there because I people throw that around all the time, but it's really about making the housing attainable, which includes affordability, it includes accessibility, and accounts for size and requirements, be it accommodating families, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, and again, the word is attainable in my opinion. Equality is really important, whether you're doing market or you're doing attainable / affordable, be it in the finishes, access to the amenities, and this necessarily the provision of the housing. Obviously, barrier-free housing requires certain design modifications and cost implications, but essentially the units from the market to the attainable are within the same building should be the same.
Now, let's dive a bit further into pricing here, and what direction is pricing heading in terms of particularly the materials, but also the resources that are used in construction?
Probably the hottest topic everyone's talking about these days. It's unfortunate, but it is. It's the reality. We've all seen the memes on TikTok or wherever, what other social media about, touting the cost of a sheet of plywood or lumber and the fact that it's quadrupling over the past year. But not many of us know that this is happening throughout the industry and with almost every division that's involved in construction. Prices are higher across the board, and building projects to meet the minimum returns are becoming more and more of a challenge. So we've witnessed many changes on the resource side as well. Access to trades is extremely difficult in our active markets. Less capable trades within the major divisions, and leading to diminished supply of those trades. So there's been this competition happening for those trades. I always laugh with my team and I say, let's go ahead and try and find a forming contractor for a high-rise project that needs to start next month. It's just not going to happen. And that's just the fact is, again, that's predominantly within the urban centers. And I know that we're kind of focusing a little bit before on GTA, but I'm also seeing this across the country. It's a challenge everywhere. So the key is really to lock in with good trades, stay loyal to them, leverage their experience, don't get in the way of progress. And it's something that's important. And I know you didn't ask this in this question, but it's important because it does play into it kind of more of a mitigant in terms of how to deal with kind of these high prices and escalation that we're dealing with, both in materials and lack of resources. And I think for those that are active, they're either hiring GCs or they're hiring CMs or they're self-performing. In my environment, working at Starlight, the way that we build, we do hire construction managers, and we hire them for a reason. They are much smarter than I am. They have that much more experience than me. So what I always say to my team is, let them educate us. Let them be the ones to build the project. Obviously, we can provide guidance and input as required, but they're the experts. And remember, there really isn't an ego in building. It's about building the best project, maintaining the returns, and delivering on time for our tenants, our purchasers, and our shareholders. Where do I see things going in terms of cost of materials, availability of resources, and supply? I do think that things are going to improve. I think the pandemic has had a significant impact on construction right now. I think where there's been a lot of uncertainty. I think, I was talking to one of my CMs going back a few months ago, and we were talking about forming construction. And I said, why is it such a challenge to go ahead and get a forming contractor for our project or to bid on our project? And this is, me coming as the developer and wanting to have minimum 2 or 3 quotes per project and per division. And he said, Josh, this is an old industry. This is we're not making that many more experienced forming contractors anymore, and that's a significant problem that we have. So, you've got a lot of these forming contractors that are out there that are getting to a point in their careers, especially with the pandemic hitting. They're in their 50s, they're getting in their 60s. Is it really worth it to go ahead and stick this out? Maybe I want to go ahead and be concerned with my health. I'm going to retire early. That next generation hasn't come up. So as a result, the experienced help isn't there. And that's just a challenge. I hate to say that I've seen more and more of that. That said, I think with a lot more vaccinations and the fact that things are starting to open up more and health is coming back to prominence and things are opening up, I think we're going to see a change in that. Obviously, lumber is a direct result of just availability at the mills. They're not making as much, and they weren't making as much because of the fact that manufacturing had slowed down. So again, not everything is to the vaccination, but I think it plays a large part in it.
Are you looking for a trusted recruiter who lives and breathes Canadian real estate? At Highview, we bring over 30 years of recruiting experience to help steer you in the right direction. We are passionate about your success in this industry and will always do our best to provide you with all the information so that you can make the best decision for your career. Contact Highview Partners today to discover how we can connect you to people who perform.
Let's now turn the conversation towards the residential tenant. And what does that residential tenant need and want? And how is this impacting your decisions around unit mix, amenities, and other features of the buildings?
Great question. So I'm going to start with, it's called I would say more of a mandate that we have at Starlight, and that is to be building complete communities. So a complete community doesn't discriminate from one location to the other. And I think it's important to understand that. So for us, we think that all tenants want the same features in every new building: access to great amenities, latest technologies, modern finishes, high ceilings, available parking, access to transit. And when we start a project, it really starts with that. We start with the building mass, and then we attach the appropriate efficiency to that building to take advantage of the appropriate necessary indoor amenity. And we don't compromise on that. I've seen some developers take the approach that it's down to every last gross leasable area. Every space has to be leased, and you want to maximize as much as you can. And I understand that. And obviously, you want to have the highest returns possible. But you're not going to have much of a return if you haven't provided the necessary features and amenities that the tenant needs. Municipalities help us, and they help direct this. But ultimately, it's the experience and thoughtful consideration that goes with our asset managers and property management to deliver the best amenities for the tenants. Similar to construction, you have to leverage the experience of those teams. I'm not on the front end of leasing, and I can't tell you in terms of the challenges related to being able to pitch one building over another, but we can make the path a little bit easier. And that's for us. We've determined that we want to make sure that we're always providing the necessary amenities that we can do. Now, obviously, when you start to get into the larger mixed-use communities, you have a lot more land, you've got larger buildings, you have opportunities to offer more. And I think about a project that we're working on right now in Victoria, which will have 1,700 units at the end of the day in terms of once it's all built out. And it'll have close to 200,000 square feet of commercial and retail at grade. Large open space, publicly accessible park. It will have features that are not necessarily common to every building, but there's an opportunity where you want to leverage a complete community. That said, you can still provide a complete community on a smaller scale. And the fact that Starlight is building typically on properties that have existing assets. So we're leveraging the fact that there's already a built-in environment. We are complementing that, and it's an addition. Sometimes in these older buildings that are the 60s and 70s vintage, they haven't made space and provisions for the gyms or the party rooms or the kids' play area or a pet washing area, basketball court, what have you. So that's where we come in. So it's an opportunity for us to go ahead and bring something. So although I look at it where it's a new construction, we have to look at it as a complete community. It's the existing asset, it's the new asset, it's the property, but it's also the impact that entire complete community will have on the surrounding areas.
Now, Starlight is one of the leading asset managers in North America. Over 20 billion of multifamily and commercial assets through various joint ventures. You joined back in 2019 and you were recently promoted to VP of Development and Construction. Congratulations. Why is Starlight a market leader, Josh? And how are you and they contributing to shaping communities across Canada and the US?
First of all, so I'm extremely fortunate to be a part of this company. I really do look at it as the pinnacle of where I am in my career, and it's a lot of the effort and experience to date that has brought me to this place. So I don't take that for granted for a second. Starlight's a leader in the provision and management of purpose-built rental housing and commercial throughout Canada and the US. And we've been doing this successfully for 20 plus years and have grown substantially in recent years through acquisitions with more than 70,000 residential units under management and over 8 million square feet. Leadership is driven to growth and maintaining our status as the best asset manager in our industry. Very much a hands-on entrepreneurial team from C-level to the coordinators. Everyone really rolls up the sleeves to get results and is driven to succeed. I love that I can talk about the most trivial aspect of a project with the CEO, the president, and global head. I definitely have worked in places where, it was focused on certain things. It was about the end prize, it was about the numbers, and it wasn't necessarily about the journey. Being a development guy and a construction guy, we all know the details. We all know about the journey in terms of how to get here. So anyone who tells you it's not about the details is really misleading you. It's absolutely all about the details. Corporately, we create value within our existing communities and buildings, and we strive to create, as I mentioned before, the term complete communities. I heard one of my colleagues mention in the past a term they said, street to suite. And I love that, and I think it's a great way of being a descriptor of what we do. That's ours, nobody else's. Street to suite. We buy. For I think for those who are not familiar with Starlight, we buy 60s and 70s vintage buildings, and we bring them up to modern day. We improve the community for our tenants and surrounding neighbors, and the value is created, not purchased.
Stepping back into the earlier years, Josh, how did you end up on this pathway, and what choices did you make when it came to education and the first steps in your career?
I have been in this industry for the better part of, I don't know, how would I kind of put back, probably 45 years. And I say 45 years because I think it started, as a little kid. We soldier having the opportunity to, escort and keep my dad company on projects. And my father's a home builder, so he started cutting his teeth in single family residential. It was a great opportunity for me. It was an opportunity to go ahead and see, and of course, be around my father, and second, really witness, the inner workings of construction. As I'm sure you've heard from other people, when they start off in construction at a young age, the father gives them a shovel and says, go ahead and, shovel some stone and, backfill the side of this trench and do whatever you can. And of course, it's, I'm sure I was working at a snail's pace, and I'm sure I wasn't really that effective, but I think it was about the fact that I had that work ethic, and I had the ability to have a father recognize that if we start this kid off right, maybe he'll get the taste of it, maybe he'll just like working, or maybe he'll hate it. So I'll go with the former, and I loved it. It was a great opportunity for me, and I'm pretty sure I did that consistently every weekend, and pretty much from, I would say, age of 5, probably all the way through to university. And summers, that was my job. I was able to do that. So going off to university, I went to University of Western Ontario. I studied geography and urban development, and had an opportunity to try and bring some of my past I guess experiences and opportunities with my father, bring it to my education. So I leveraged that over the span of that career. As I got through my undergraduate, and all that time, again, summers, always working in construction, always being around my father and the job sites, and probably doing a little bit more than just shoveling and backfilling sides of properties. Probably got into cleaning houses maybe back then. Still wasn't having a chance to go ahead and be any experienced trade. I don't think the trust was there at that point. I went into graduate school right after undergraduate, and I went to the Ohio State University. Proud to be a Buckeye, and proud to have had a couple years under my belt there. And I did a master's in city and regional planning. And it was a great opportunity. It was an opportunity to get a little bit further into development, understand what it means to plan communities, understand what it means to do more than just the creating of that one lot for the home. And it's a larger story. How do municipalities work? How do we make decisions in terms of where roads go? How do we decide in terms of what policies to put in place? And it was a great opportunity. Had an opportunity to work with a municipal government throughout my graduate time at Ohio State, and learned a little bit about public service back then. It was great. Right out of graduate school, I wanted to stay in the industry. And like my peers, I went to one of these planning conferences and went to one of the job fairs and saw an opportunity to work with the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, which was way out there, and it was nothing anyone would have thought that I would do. Here I am going and working for a nonprofit, and in Las Vegas of all places. So it was really interesting to go ahead and experience that, and got a really good lesson of the way big industry works in terms of the residential development and construction, and the challenges that they were having in terms of working in municipalities and regions for approvals. So I was the kind of the government affairs specialist back then. quickly, after about a year, made my way back to Toronto, still playing in real estate, getting more on the telecom side, riding the telecom and the .com opportunities that presented itself, working with companies like Rogers. Went to New York after that and worked with a startup on riser management and telecommunications and wiring buildings and putting antennas up on buildings and doing leasehold spaces. It was great. Again, always real estate.
Sounds to me that real estate is inside of your DNA, Josh, and you've certainly capitalized on having broad exposure through education and the first steps in your career, both here and also in the States. Talk to us about that migration from working in the US to Canada, and how has your career taken shape since then?
After a little bit of time in New York, I made my way back to Toronto. Unfortunate time in 2000, 2001. We saw obviously the impacts on technology. A lot of those startups, unfortunately, were losing the access to capital, and opportunities weren't quite there as they were. And I found myself going back to work in residential construction. And my father, who had great foresight back then, said, "Hey, why don't you go ahead and start building some residential communities for yourself?" So it started me off on a project. Here was a great infill opportunity to do some townhouses and, knock your socks off and see how you do. So, really just threw me into the water. He said, you got this education behind you, you got this experience. See what happens. Anyways, I loved it and succeeded and was great. After about 4 or 5 years doing that, I wanted to get back to what I was trained for, at least at university and graduate school, which was planning communities and doing larger scale developments and zonings and things like that. So I had the good opportunity to go ahead and work with smart centers, and I got into the big box development and spent 9 years working at smart centers and working on some great projects throughout Ontario. And it took me everywhere. I was, whether it be 4 hours north of here, 5 hours, 2 hours south of here, a few hours east of here, 4 hours west of here. I was all over the province, and I really enjoyed it. It was a great opportunity for me. Small scale sometimes, but mainly large developments. And I really kind of grew my career and learned the most from my mentors there. And I was very fortunate. After that, I took my commercial experience a little bit further, and I joined Dream and worked on their commercial developments. Really grew a team there that was about going and extracting value for commercial and retail on lands they owned. So we started to build some developments. Took me to places unknown like Saskatoon, Regina, High River, Alberta, places that I never thought I'd ever go ahead and experience. But great opportunity. It got me out of my comfort zone and got me into a place where I can start to work again in different environments, and again back to building teams, which I really enjoyed as well. I mentioned before I did a little bit of a small stint working with a builder out of Guelph, and really enjoyed that. And it was a good opportunity to get back into what I knew at the start of my career, which is home building, and back to kind of going on job sites and watching things and be active, but also growing land development for that company. Starlight is at a place where I believe is the pinnacle of my career. It really is a place where I was able to kind of bring all that great experience that I had working in all these different shops and my education, and I was able to go ahead and bring it to Starlight, working in purpose-built rental as well as commercial development, coming into a team that was established or partially established, but growing, and just huge opportunities. Never did I think I'd have an opportunity to work on as many projects as I am here. It was also an opportunity to kind of broaden myself and work outside of pure development, but also add construction into my repertoire. So working with that, building a construction team, taking advantage of working on some larger scale projects, high rise, that I hadn't really touched on before. Great projects, great opportunity, great growth.
A diverse, I would say challenging, rewarding, well-traveled lifelong career in real estate. Thanks very much for sharing your journey with us. Now, looking at some of the decisions that you've had to make over the years, what are the ones that really have helped to elevate your position in the industry?
Well, I've always worked hard and leveraged my network, and you never lose sight of that. Relationships are key, and I think it's whether it's this industry or any industry. I think it's important to go ahead and hold on to that. But that's really helped me, for starters, in the industry. I think I look at every place that I've worked, and it's always been connected to someone in my past, or there's a network that's there, and I think that's the way it works. You get interviewed for a job, someone you could be an unknown commodity, and then all of a sudden it's a conversation that person who's potentially looking to hire you speaks to someone. What do you know about this person? And then they get the background. So it's important to go ahead and make sure that you maintain those relationships, and that was really important. Never burn a bridge. I try to be the best generalist I could be. I like to know a little bit about each part of the business and not really pigeon my hole into, one particular area. And I think that's worked well for me over the years. You start off with a little bit of the community development. You understand a little bit more planning. You start working with municipalities. You're getting more into construction. You're starting to understand finance. You start to work more on the business side, a little bit on the leasing side, and essentially you take all these parts together, and I think it makes the whole. I've always tried to be active in the community, and be it real estate, nonprofits, organizations, and with my peers. It's often I'm called on to provide some assistance and provide some direction and some mentorship, and I thrive on that. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity, and as I said before, it's a privilege. So I don't take it lightly, and I'll always offer the opportunity if it presents itself to be a mentor to anyone in the industry. So I always make myself available, but I'm also open to suggestions from those that are more knowledgeable and experienced in any particular area that I'm in. I don't get too far ahead of myself. I know what I know, and I know what I want to learn. So I'll seek out the best knowledge I can. I don't try and fake it. It's not worth it for you, and it's important that you leverage off the smarter people or the more experienced people. I try to work not only across different asset classes, but I also in different markets, both in the U.S. and in Canada. So that was good for me. I wouldn't say culturally, but I think it just kind of gave me some diversity, and it gave me an opportunity to see in terms of how different cities and different groups operate. Ultimately, there's commonalities in every place you work, but it's important to kind of understand the differences. I never got too proud of the work in any of my environments that I've been. And as I said before, it's a privilege, not an obligation, to develop land. And, never take it for granted, whether I was building a retail box for McDonald's in Edmonton or a high-rise purpose-built tower in Vancouver. I'm thankful for every opportunity that I received in my career.
Some solid decisions there in terms of taking that generalist approach to being very active inside of the community and maintaining that network, building those relationships, not burning bridges, not faking it along the way. And I think that certainly is going to offer some great advice to some of our listeners as well in terms of the decisions that they're making moving forward in elevating their position. Now, if you could rewind the clock, what are some of the choices or decisions that perhaps you would have framed differently, and why?
So I probably would have paid more attention in my business classes and probably my economics classes, only because I think it probably frames the majority of my current conversations. So it was a bit of an uphill battle trying to get there. And I think if I would have had that base knowledge, I think it would have helped me in my early years. One of my companies that I worked for, I think one of their goals was always to go ahead and, for purposes of succession planning, was always to hire the best analyst they could. The analyst comes in, the analyst understands the numbers, the analyst working through the assumptions. And I think understanding the numbers start is really good. Whether they make their way into a development manager role or asset manager role after that, I think it's only going to help them in their careers. So for me, I probably would have started on that level. I would have also likely stayed in one place a little bit longer. I mentioned in my career, I bounced around from graduate school. I was in Columbus, Ohio, and then I went to Las Vegas, and I went back to Toronto, then I went to New York, and then I went back to Toronto again. So I was this eternal nomad for probably the first, I'd say, 5 years of my career, trying to figure things out for myself and figuring what I wanted to do. So I wouldn't say I was lost. That I just was unsure. And that said, it's probably worked out for me okay now these days. But I think I probably missed out on a lot of the fun along the way. So kind of take the experience for what it's worth. Get your feet grounded. Understand the environment that you're in. Really take your time. Don't rush to kind of jump to the next opportunity, and then take something from that and then move on. And finally, I probably wouldn't have rushed into graduate school so quickly. A lot of my friends and peers were taking a little bit of a break in between, getting some solid work experience. And I think I probably could have taken advantage of that. I was anxious. I wanted to get all my school out of the way. I wanted to go ahead and quickly get into graduate school and start working, start making some money, getting some real experience. But I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity. And I think if I had to look back, I probably would have taken a little bit of time, maybe a year or two, to work a bit, figure out in terms of what I liked about work, and then made my way back into graduate school.
Let's now get to know you better. And one of the things I like to introduce to the conversation is a quick fire round of questions. So I'm going to kick off with the first one. An unusual habit.
Falling asleep in my daughter's room at 9 o'clock at night and waking up at 2 a.m. and not being able to fall back asleep.
The book you recommend most to others to read.
Who Stole My Cheese?
2 parts to the next question. Your favorite sport to play and spectate?
Football to play, hockey to watch.
What do you love most about this city, Toronto?
Good one. Diversity.
Absolutely. Your favorite beverage?
Has to be beer.
Best ever investment?
My kids.
What puts the fire in your belly and what makes you jump up and out of bed in the morning?
The smell of construction and the exhaust from trucks and knowing that it's going to be a day full of construction activity.
I just need to open my balcony door and I get a whiff of that every day.
Sure.
Your proudest achievement?
Landing my wife and the birth of my children.
Favorite quote?
Be humble, be hungry, and always be the hardest working person in the room.
Humble, hungry, and the hardest worker in the room. Great quote. That brings us now to our final question, Josh. With all that you have experienced over the past few decades in the real estate development and construction space, if you were to highlight the big lessons and pay it forward to the next generation of industry leaders, what would that message be?
Ooh, it's a tough one. Get the experience wherever you can get it, and never be too proud to do the work and be part of the journey. So whether it's digging a ditch, backfilling the side of a house, being involved in the planning and approval for a Starbucks on a postage stamp piece of property for a commercial project, doing an approval for a sign bylaw or anything like that, that gives you the opportunity to engage with a municipality, engage with consultants, anything and everything, it all is part of your career. It's very important that you take all those parts and you put it together. You learn from each of these opportunities. Get involved in the details. Don't shirk them. Don't go ahead and give them to somebody else to go ahead and do. Raise your hand and say, I want to be involved. Take an active seat. You may not necessarily have all the answers, but you're there at the table to learn. And the more you learn from that, the more rewarding an opportunity you'll have for your future. And the more of, and I wouldn't say the word generalist, but the more opportunity you have to round out your career. So take every opportunity to its fullest. Don't pigeonhole yourself into working within a box. If you don't understand something, ask the questions. People will always want to go ahead and share information and teach you. If you're not someone who's familiar with the numbers and pro formas, ask a question. Say, hey, I want to go ahead and be a part of it. I want to learn about this. And then put your hand up and sit with them and work through it. If you don't know something about construction, put up your hand. I want to come visit a construction site. Let me see in terms of how you build here. What are the steps involved here? Again, it's going to help you in your career. You're going to learn. You'll be that much more knowledgeable. Not saying you're necessarily going to go ahead and be, the next CFO of the company, not saying you're going to be the next, head of construction, but you'll learn something from that. So the next conversation that's had, it's not foreign to you and you can participate.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.